Good morning. My name is Kimberly Freeman, and I'm Assistant Dean for Diversity Initiatives and Community Relations at the UCLA Anderson School of Management. And it's my pleasure to be here this morning to help kick this panel off. I was recently at a women's conference a couple weeks ago, and someone said, you want to leave these conferences feeling like you've been shot out of a cannon. So if this morning's panel was any indicator, the previous panel was any indicator, I already feel like I've been shot out of a cannon. So I'm looking forward to what these panelists have to say. Thank you for being a part of Track 2. The sessions in this track will explore solutions for the issues women face in tech jobs, particularly at medium and large companies and organizations. We will end this track in the afternoon by getting feedback from each and every one of you on the most important corporate and public strategies to systemically affect the attraction, retention, and advancement of women in tech. I now want to welcome the first panel on policies to attract women to tech jobs. This panel will be moderated by Catherine Oyama, Senior Policy Counsel for Google. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning. My name is Katie Oyama. I work for Google in the Washington, D.C. office. I'm on our public policy team. And thank you so much to UCLA and the Luskin School for hosting this day-long conversation around an issue that I think many of us in this room and on the panel care about so much. At Google, about a year ago, we released our data in terms of women's composition of the Google workforce. And part of the reason why we did that was in the hopes of really sparking a kind of cross-industry conversation about where we are today and what are some of the strategies that we could all be thinking about to get to places that we know we should be. So I know there have been other conferences and panels that have a lot of conversations about kind of the personal career arc, right? So like lean in. Do you lean in? Do you lean back? Do you lean out? So today's conversation is not going to be the lean in discussion. We want to focus a little bit more at a higher level, so beyond the personal, but really focus in on specific corporate and public policy strategies that have been effective based on research and real-world experience, and have a conversation with these panel of experts to kind of discuss those lessons learned. So let me introduce the panel. We're going to plan to do about 5 minutes of opening remarks from each of the panelists and then have a discussion. And we'll definitely make sure that we leave time for Q&A from the audience. So thank you so much for being here. Immediately to my left, we have Susan Palm. Welcome, Susan. And Susan's the VP of Industry Solutions for MetricStream, which is based in Palo Alto. And then to Susan's left, we have Madeline Hellman, who's the professor and author at NYU, and her academic research focuses, among other things, on gender stereotypes in the workplace. And then we also have Brooke Hunter, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Engine. And Engine's a terrific organization that focuses on advocacy for startups and promoting tech entrepreneurs. And then all the way there on the end, we have Victoria Oseni, who is the Chief of Staff of the IT department at CAA, the creative arts agency right here in Southern California. So welcome, and we'll turn it over to Susan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. I just want to tell you, as a company in Silicon Valley, I find it just particularly interesting that when I'm asked to get resumes of qualified individuals to help fill jobs in our company, which is growing at about 100% rate, I don't ever get any females. I get always male applicants. And so attracting women to technology and innovation careers is going to only increase, I think, if we equip women with the skills necessary to be successful in this field. And the field is growing. The Internet of Things means that technology and innovation is affecting not just what we do in our business, but our home, our health, our cars. And so we don't have to worry about getting rid of those white men that was referred to earlier. There's going to be plenty of jobs to go around. We just need to get people skilled so that they can take these positions on. So I've seen a couple of things that are really effective as I've done some work in the educational area, and that's really where I think colleges and universities can play a pretty significant role. With that said, though, by the time we get to colleges and universities, it may already be too late. I spoke with a professor of economics this week who told me that one of the top priorities in that space is the fact that only 25% of students are electing a major in economics or math across the country. And this is being identified as one of the key problems that we have to solve. So clearly we have to start solving for that problem now before these kids are getting to college. But let's tell you about a couple successful programs in the colleges and universities. Lawrence University, Princeton, Oxford are all launching programs in interdiscipline areas focused on innovation and entrepreneurship. And in all of these schools, the classes are fully subscribed. And these classes are designed to build the kinds of skills that students would need to help analyze and solve innovation kinds of problems. At Lawrence University, the program is in its 7th year, again has about 25% women who are participating in the program, but even a more sobering statistic is of that 25% women, very few, 1 or 2, are not foreign students. So when we think about the issue of women in technology and innovation, we have, kind of a two-pronged situation here. There are some countries who are doing a better job of preparing or equipping their students to go into and think about these careers. But here in the United States, the data is actually significantly more sobering. So I think that's something we have to be mindful of. And what we're doing at Lawrence, and we've built an advisory committee, is we're trying to involve more women on the panels. We have a Shark Tank kind of situation. We're involving more women, and it's interesting as well that in a situation where a woman is a professor of a class, the majority of the participants are women. So this issue of mentoring and role modeling is still very, very important. But getting back to the partnership and what can we do, Purdue University has decided to take the problem back down to the high schools and has built, and by the way, for those of you who don't know about Purdue's engineering school, 95% placement, tremendous work done in women's programs, just won a Google Rise Award this year for the work they're doing with women. And they are bringing programs into the high schools. They have a program for freshmen and sophomores. They have a program for juniors. And again, these are summer programs, 100% subscribed. So the demand is there. I think that one of the other things that we should think about, besides colleges and universities as being a great partner to work with, is some work that's being done in Charlotte between businesses and colleges. In that situation, the colleges are working with businesses to understand what are the skills that you need to be effective in your businesses today, and they're taking that input back into the colleges and universities and tweaking the curriculum. I mean, this is not wholesale change because, at least in my alma mater, the professors were very nervous about becoming a vocational school and not a liberal arts school. But there's a lot of partnership where businesses and universities can play a really strong role. So I'm a firm believer that education is a big part of the solution here. Colleges and universities have their role to play, but as it was discussed earlier, high schools, we have to get in and start encouraging young women to think about these programs before they get to college. Okay?
Great. Madeline?
Okay, I'm Madeline Heilman. I'm a professor at NYU, and I study gender bias, and I study gender stereotypes. So I'm going to take this conversation to a very different kind of level, which I hope sets it up for some other people here, to just kind of understand what is going on when people are making decisions, whether people are making decisions to actually throw their hats in the ring for jobs or making decisions about whether or not to select women when they do apply for such jobs. So I'm going to go all the way back here, and let me just start by saying I'm sure you all have heard of gender stereotypes. Let me just refresh your memory. Men are thought to be agentic. We describe them as, active and dominant and ambitious and bold and independent. Women, on the other hand, we see as very relationship-oriented, very concerned about other people, sensitive, sentimental, and so on. And what's very important here is not just that men and women are described differently, but it's kind of oppositional. So while women are seen as communal, they are not seen as agentic. It's not a kind of half and half kind of situation. So what's the problem? I mean, what's wrong with being nice and kind and wonderful and relationship-oriented and caring about other people? Well, there's absolutely nothing. And in fact, if you ask people, women are wonderful. People think women are fabulous. They're just great. The problem is that there's a real inconsistency, or what I call a lack of fit, between the attributes that we associate with women and the kinds of requirements that we see as necessary to do the kinds of jobs that are kind of typically seen as male, and I'll put that in quotation marks. And certainly the whole tech industry and many of the most prestigious jobs within it are in that category. So women are seen as somehow falling short. They don't have the right stuff. I mean, and that's a real issue. If you have that lack of fit, there are going to be consequences that are perceptual consequences that occur. I mean, women don't want to go into a field that they don't belong in, that they don't think they're going to be very good at, or that they think other people think they're not going to be very good at. So that's a real consequence of this perception that there's this lack of fit. The other is that when they do apply, they do kind of throw their hats in the ring, they're negatively evaluated. People think they can't do it. They're not going to be as good as a guy with exactly the same credentials. These expectations that come from this sense, this lack of fit, are very difficult to change. They are self-sustaining, and they're self-sustaining in a very interesting kind of way. We kind of make them come true. We cognitively make them come true. Let me give you some examples. If I think you're not going to be very good at something, and I'm looking at your resume, I'm probably going to focus on, I'm not going to notice the things that are really excellent. Okay? That's going to kind of ruin my whole view of the thing. And it's easy. It's very easy if I use these stereotypes and these expectations. Why have to be challenged? Okay? If I've had an interview with you, and I'm trying to kind of afterwards make notes and recall what's gone on, well, I'm going to remember the things that fit with my theory of what you're like. Okay? I may ignore other things. I may even falsely remember. I may remember things you didn't even say somebody else said, because they somehow fit my idea of what you're like. And interpretation is very, very important. I mean, I've done research that shows that if you present people who've worked jointly on a successful task, women are consistently given less credit for that outcome, with no reason whatsoever to not say, oh, they work together, it should be 50-50. I mean, why not? Women are given less credit. Again, it fits the story. It fits the stereotype story. Same thing if it's irrefutable that somebody is successful and it's a woman, well, maybe it wasn't such a tough task, maybe she got a lucky break, or maybe somebody helped her. These are all ways that we kind of keep those expectations alive. We make our expectations come true. So what do we do about this? I mean, this is very fundamental. It's not true only for women. It's true when you have stereotypes about any group. And we do this. It makes our world much simpler to see the world that way and make it come true. Well, what can we do? In the case that we're talking about now, I would have a couple of things that I at least suggest that we think about. One is the characterization of the job, and this has come up before the New York Times article that was earlier this week that Nancy mentioned as we started. A job has to be seen as male, and I say again in quotes, for this all to kick in. And so if we can cause jobs not to be seen as totally male, we should make somewhat of a break in this cycle here. Things like, including aspects in job descriptions that are not just this heavy-duty male stuff that is associated with women and that are part of jobs. I mean, things like, dealing with subordinates. Like, that's something women are supposed to be good at. We never hear about that. Managing, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that could go in. The New York Times article made clear that if you say that these jobs have some purpose other than just the technical aspects of them, if they're going to do some good, if they're going to help somebody, that really helps in attracting people. Hey, that's not very hard to do with the kinds of jobs we're talking about. And also providing information that there are other women in these jobs will help. I mean, that immediately makes it less of a 100% male kind of job. So differing characterizations of the same job can really help. There's the other side of it. How do we avoid that bias in decision-making of decision makers when women do apply, when their applications are screened, when they come in for interviews, when actual decisions are made, when they're placed in jobs, and so on? A couple of things that at least my research and the research of others in my field would talk to. First is the quantity and the quality of the information. If you have these expectations that are born of stereotypes, ambiguity just allows them to flourish. So if there's not a lot of information, people fill in the blanks, and they fill in the blanks with what they expect to happen. So it's very critical that there be a lot of information and that it be relevant to the decision that is being made. That doesn't always happen in these selection decisions. The second is that the evaluative criteria are clear. You know, we tend to use these vague, abstract criteria. People should be dynamic. They should be charismatic. They should be innovative. What do those things mean? I mean, they mean different things when we're talking about different people. The more clear, the more concrete your criteria are, the more you're working against this tide of bias, which is kind of pushing against you. Having a fixed evaluative structure, making sure that you collect the same information from everybody. You know, look, think of doing like an unstructured interview, and you talk to a guy, and he goes on and on and on about all of the things he's accomplished. You talk to a woman, and she's much less reticent. And so the unstructured interview with the guy is going to go on about all these things, and you get more information. With the woman, may stop dead. If it's a more structured interview, if you ask everybody about experiences that have been successful, you're going to elicit that information whether people volunteered or they don't volunteer. Very important. You have a fixed set of criteria, and you get the same information from everybody. And also that you establish the weighting of that information. Like what's really important, because if that doesn't happen, then if you kind of want to pick the person you want to pick, you kind of rearrange it in your head. So what's important is what that person is good at. So you need to have the criteria laid out and like, what are your priorities? These are like very simple kinds of decision-making strategies that really help you structure a situation so that bias is at least attenuated. And the last thing I want to say is that I think it's very important to make people accountable. I think that if you have people explain the decisions they make, if you have them have to justify, even to themselves, but certainly in a more public way, if you have to explain why you chose this person rather than that person, I think that helps a lot. For one, it stops people from kind of going on automatic, which happens with stereotypes. You don't even know you're using them. So you have to kind of stop and pause, be more deliberative, be more systematic. But even more, if you have to provide some kind of rationale for what you've decided to do, you know, you're going to stop, whether it's because of your personal values and you don't want to see yourself as a sexist or a racist or whatever it may be, or because of sheer impression management. I mean, you don't want to look like a bad person in front of other people. And so when you start to have to think about justifying that decision, those things enter in. Anyway, I'll stop because I'm sure there's, I could go on and on, but I will shut up and hand this over to you. I'm so sorry.
There's a lot to unpack there on the hiring, so we'll come back to it. But yeah, let's turn it over to Fred. Thanks.
Well, thank you, and I'm happy to pick up where you left off. But before I start, I just wanted to make a couple of quick points. One, just to amplify what Jane Margolis said at the top, which is that I think having these conversations framed just as women in technology really, we need to be thinking more broadly than that, and that, you know, we really need to be thinking about people from all kinds of underrepresented groups, because if we just have middle-class white women, we haven't really made that much progress. The other thing that I wanted to say is that a lot of what I'm going to talk about sort of talks about women as though they're, different than men, and that's not because I believe there's any inherent difference in women and men in the way that they are, biologically, wired or anything like that. I think it's that we live in a culture where gender has been used to sort of divide, break us down into these two binary groups of women and men. And I think that because we have all been raised in that culture, it's really hard to come up and have these like neutral personalities. We all, women do respond to different things than men do, and I don't think that's an inherent thing. I think that is a cultured thing. So I just wanted to make that clear before I started. So one of the things that we were talking about when we were preparing for this panel is just what are some actual tangible things we can do? Like, what are we getting wrong? What can we get right? So I think there are a lot of areas that we could do a much better job, and I think it starts with the hiring process. I think it starts with the job descriptions that we put out there. I think if you look at job descriptions for tech professions, you find a lot of these sort of traditionally like masculine behaviors. This, like you're saying, there are words like aggressive, they're hard driving, we work hard, we play hard. There are masculine pronouns used sometimes in job descriptions, even now, which is kind of ridiculous. If you're writing a job description, one of the first, most easiest things you can do is review your job description and make sure you're not talking about he, him. I mean, that's just a sort of a gimme. Another thing you can do, and especially there's been this sort of glorification, I think, of like the startup with, a bunch of bros and they've got their 24-hour-a-day keg and they're just working, they're crushing code. And I think that environment is not necessarily an environment, certainly, where I would feel like I would be welcome. I would feel like, I might be an impediment to their, foosball game or something because I'm not a good foosball player. And I think that that's true of a lot of women. And a lot of women, that's not what they see as important. I don't care if there's a 24-hour keg. I want to know that I can go home at a reasonable time to still be able to see my family. I want to know that it's okay for me to think that having a family is important. And I think that it seems kind of like a minor thing, but even in writing your job descriptions, you can really help make a change and make your environment seem much more attractive to women. You can use different phrases. You can emphasize the collaboration that's possible at your company. You can talk about a culture that supports growth, that supports skill building, where you'll have continued learning opportunities. You can actually list out some of your work-life policies in your job descriptions. Say you have parental leave. If you have parental leave, own it. If you say that you have parental leave, that can oftentimes make women feel like, okay, so not only do you have a policy, but maybe it would be okay if I got pregnant and actually had to take some leave to take care of the baby. So from there, you go into the resume review. And so this is where all of our inherent biases come out. In the resume review and in the interviewing, just like Madeline was saying, when you have all of these vague criteria, it's very easy to just do this stereotyping of the candidates that you're seeing and have them fit, and let's be honest, like a lot of hiring committees tend to be made up of white men. All of the research shows that you hire people that look like you, that act like you, that you feel comfortable around. And a lot of times we use this word, which I think some of us are now starting to loathe, of fit, cultural fit. Will they be a fit? And will they be a fit a lot of times is just coded language for will they be like me? Will they cause me a problem? Will they be a pain in my ass? Because I have to suddenly start thinking about, there's more than just this standard sort of meanness out there in the workforce. So also in reading resumes, women are oftentimes inclined to describe their work as collaborative, as things that they accomplished as part of a team, things that they contributed to the success of, not I owned it, not I did this just by myself. They're aware that we're not working on our own. We are working as part of groups. And so a lot of times that's how they want to describe their work on their resume. And that can be problematic to somebody that's reviewing resumes, and you've got 10 resumes from these guys who are saying, oh, I owned that product, I created that product, I built it from scratch, and then it, became so wildly successful, and the woman saying, I contributed to that product. And I think that this is, Joan C. Williams was mentioned earlier, like, this is one of those places where you have to disrupt your thinking. You have to very consciously challenge your own biases. And so the way that you can do that is say, okay, I understand that in reading these resumes, maybe women aren't going to claim ownership as much as men, and I need to account for that when I'm reviewing the resumes. The same thing goes in interviews. The way that people talk about what they've done, it's very similar. And yeah, so there's just a lot of, this, I have some examples of people that are making change. Etsy did a great job. Etsy, they started off with a small tech team, but they realized in 2011 that 6% of the team was made up of women. And they realized that was a terrible problem. They wanted to solve it. They wanted to solve it fast. It was much easier for them, I want to put this caveat out there, because they were so small. It's much harder for a larger company to make this dramatic change overnight. But because they were so small, they were able to look at what they were doing and realize they had their own pipeline problem. They developed a scholarship program to the Recurse Center, and they gave scholarships to people from underrepresented groups that included living expenses. And they ended up hiring a lot of the people that came through that program. And now the percentage of their tech team who are women is 69%. That's 6 to 69%. 2011 was not that long ago. And so, like I said, I don't think there's an expectation that a large corporation is going to be able to make that change. It's just ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is that if you could make that change, even on a team of 150 people, that's going in the right direction. And we need to learn from the positive things that are being done. And I'll leave it there and hand it over to you.
Great. Is my mic on?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a really soft speaker, so I just want to make sure everybody in the back hears me. I'm the Chief of Staff of IT at the Creative Artist Agency. And before I get into talking about what my role is and how I've actually helped initiate change within the company, I want to talk about my humble beginnings, like really, really quickly. About 20 years ago, I started working in IT, and I found myself in a group of 15 network administrators. They were all young white males, and I was the only female. I was the only person of color. And so very soon I became part of the boys. I wore jeans and t-shirts all the time, got rid of all my skirts, because I wanted to blend in and be part of the group, because it was all about the team. And I sort of stood out and, walking around in skirts. So I changed. I became a tomboy. And then one year, something happened that set me aside from the rest of these guys. I did something that none of them in the room could ever think of doing. I got pregnant. Right? And there became the reality that, okay, I am different. I'm in the tech world. I work just as great as they do, but I'm seen as somebody different. I started going back to wearing skirts and put on my girly self that, I'm going to own this. I'm going to be a woman. I'm going to be a champion of tech. But when I looked around the room, I said to myself, like, why am I the only one here? And why are there no other women in this role? In a group of like 16 of us, 15 are all males. And the management at that time was a completely male-driven management. And I came to the realization that a lot of these changes have to be championed from the top, from management. And there was nobody in management to fend for bringing additional females on board. So fast forward another 20 years, I arrived at CAA. And when I first of all joined the company, once again, I was probably the fourth woman in the entire IT department of about, at that point in time, it was about 60 employees. There were 4 women in the IT department. We had a leadership team of 8 white males, no females on leadership. Luckily enough for me, and fortunately enough, about 3 years ago, one of the members of leadership left, and I became the first female on the leadership team within the IT department, which was an amazing feat. My boss has been the same boss. We've had the same CIO for 23 years. So it was something that he actually realized that, we need to champion this change. We need to attract more females. So at that point in time, it became a specific and intentional effort to attract females, not only to attract females, but then once we attracted them, then the chore was on keeping them. And not only keeping them, was growing them. We want to make sure that as females came into the fold, if they came in as a one-trick pony, they left with 5 additional skills if they did want to leave. And so part of my strategy, which has been a 2-year strategy so far, and it will be a strategy at least for the next 10 years, because I don't think we are at where we want to be right now. We've grown from 4 women in the IT department. Now we have about 14 women in the IT department who are technologists, who are coders, who are network administrators. They work on our service desk. We have just actually added an additional woman onto our leadership team. So now our leadership team of 8 now has 2 females and 6 males. But it's a great move of the needle for us. So some of the avenues that I've actively sought out to attract females into our IT department are as such. Number one, I started going to a lot of conferences, and I'm not one that go to conferences and just sit there for 3 days, because I had children at home, and time away from my children was really, really bothersome for me. But I started going out to these conferences, Women in Technology, Grace Hopper, and started interacting and increasing my network of other female technologists who actually, number one, had the same mission as I did, and number 2, women who actually wanted to work in technology. And the first time I went to Grace Hopper, I was actually amazed at the number of women that were in attendance. So I started to build a relationship and a network in those areas. The second thing that we did, we have an organization within our company that sort of incubated, and it's called Communities in Schools. And what that organization does is that we reach out to inner city schools and reach out to female groups within those departments, like women, young girls in technology, girls who are not too sure if they want to work in technology, or those that actually have no idea what working in technology means. So we put on STEM events for them, and they come and they learn, they do an hour of coding, and they learn to code and say, wow, this is really cool. So that it's not mutually exclusive for me to want to be girly and be a technologist. You can do both, right? And I think the face of that is changing dramatically in regards to, you have your tomboy-looking girl that's a coder to women in heels now that code, and I think it's an amazing thing. A second thing that we sort of drive for, if I'm a female that works in technology and we have other female technologists that work in the department, you know other people, you've encountered other people who are also technologists, who have a technology degree, who work in computer science, who want to work and are looking for jobs. Personal references are also something that we really, really hone in on. You know, you go to your own little organizations, you go to your developer or coder groups, which I may not be privy to because I don't understand a word of code. I've never coded in my life, so I won't go to those events. But other coders and developers within our department that actually have those skills and go out and meet people, you know, my advice is to them, when you go out and you forge these relationships, please bring information back into me. Let me see who's out there. Let's reach out to them. Even if they're not actively looking for jobs, I then build a pipeline of really viable, intelligent women that we can bring into the company to work for us from a technology standpoint. And just to say finally, you know, it's not a one-time thing for us as a company. It's something that we have to continually do. So I continually forge in relationships. I go to meetup groups. I meet people all the time and exchange business cards and say, you know, we don't have positions available right now, but I'm really interested in you, and I know that you have a network of people that you could also introduce to me, and we continue to build it in that manner.
That's great, thank you. I think that perception of young women and things like computer science, is that something they identify with at a very young age? We've probably all seen that those are really important educational points, and the sooner that self-identity can start to develop, the better. One of the things that we worked on at Google over the holidays was partnering with Made with Code, which is really geared towards young girls and attracting them to computer science. And every year, right around the holidays, there's a tree down by the White House which gets lit up, and the president comes out, and there's singers. It's a big deal in Washington. And for the first time this year, there was a program that allowed girls all over the country to code their own state trees. So it was a fairly simple program that even like my cousin, who's very young, was able to work on. But they were able to literally do their own program, and then their lights would show up. And so it made it very tangible for them, and they could pick the shapes and things like that. And that night, my cousin was asked by her dad, like, what'd you do today? She's like, I did some coding.
Right.
But I wanted to ask, you talked about that pretty extraordinary growth within CAA from an IT staff of 4 women to 14, and it sounds like your leadership in that department was critical. And I was curious, for those who work at companies, did you also get buy-in from the executive level at CAA? Do you think that's a necessary strategy? And if you did that, how were you able to accomplish that as well?
Well, initially, so we work for an entertainment agency, right? Entertainment is just such a different animal
Yeah.
than a lot of other organizations. So from a tech perspective, when people are even looking for tech companies to come work at, they're not thinking of CAA. They're thinking of going to Google. They want to go to Facebook. They want to go to places where it's really cool and they're coding code. But
CAA is pretty cool.
it's very cool. But the company as a whole had a mandate several years ago that we need to increase diversity. And diversity wasn't just gender-centric. It was ethnic-centric as well. So they wanted to increase that. And so basically the mandate funneled down from the top, and we as IT department said, okay, we want to take charge in this action. Let's actually show the rest of the company how it's done by also leading the way in that. So yes, there was, corporate buy-in, but then I report to a person who is just so supportive in allowing me to take charge and say, we need to do this, and he sees the need for it too, and he's
Right.
just extremely supportive in that.
So it sounds like
manner.
there was a good partnership between kind of the executive level and then the teams that were actually implementing these
Correct.
decisions. That's
Correct.
great. Many of you discussed the role of kind of job descriptions in the hiring process, and I was wondering, maybe Madeline, if you could start just unpacking that a little bit. Even anecdotally, I've seen, male colleagues that will look at a job description. There's like, 4 factors, and they'll go through them, and they probably don't have any, and they're like, well, I'll apply and we'll see. And then female colleagues will go through the first 3, and they have them, and they get to the 4th, and they don't, and they wouldn't even think to apply for the position. Are there ways, especially for folks here that work at companies, are there ways that jobs can be described that would make those positions more attractive to female candidates than others?
I think
Yeah, do you
Brooke
mind?
discussed it. Go.
Yeah,
Go for
yeah.
it.
So there's actually a name for that, and it's called imposter syndrome. And it doesn't just apply to women, it applies to everyone. But women, I think, probably suffer from it a little more than most people. And so Hewlett-Packard actually did a study of their very large workforce, and they found that women were only applying for jobs that they were 100% qualified for, and the men were applying for jobs that they were 60% qualified for.
Maybe
So
60.
so that is, if they met 6 of 10 criteria, they would throw their hat in the ring. Women had to meet all 10. And this is another part of the whole hiring process that I think all companies should be aware of. And I think one of the easiest things to do is to make it very clear in your job description that this is what we would like to have. You don't have to have all of the criteria to be considered. And
To make that explicit in
to
the
make
description?
Yes, I like to make that explicit in job descriptions, that this is, and there was actually a good discussion on Twitter about job descriptions a while back that somebody storified that I can find later. And I just lost my train of thought, sorry. But but I think the idea was that, yeah, you just have to make it explicit. You have to make sure that people know they can apply. And that job descriptions, that's what it was. It was that job descriptions a lot of times are just wish lists for companies. It's a list of things they would love to have, the unicorn candidate that has all of these different experiences, but it's hard to find in one person.
I would just add that I don't think you should get just totally fixed on the job description itself. It's really the notion, a kind of a larger notion, which is that does this work for me? Is this something that I can do? And certainly the early training is critical for them, because you see that you can do it, and there are other women doing it as well. So the job description is very concrete, and I think there are easy things that can be done with that, but it's really this larger issue.
And I also think we need to consider broadening our view of what that job
Well, that's-
description is. Because I think we're caught up in the old, you have to have coded. Well, anyone who's coded 4 years ago, those skills are irrelevant in today's marketplace. So you have to be able to think, and you have to be smart I mean,
And
the
flexible.
requirements for jobs in tech are so different today than they were even, like I said, 2 or 3
Right.
years ago, that, and there are so many jobs out there, this whole Internet of Things, and everything that has an innovation or an entrepreneurial edge to it. You know, every single one of us in the room could bring something to the party in terms of that. So I actually think job descriptions need an overhaul. Yeah, big overhaul.
I wanted to go back to, I think, some points, Madeline, you were also making about some preconceived notions that hiring managers might have about what, the right person for the role might look like, or who would be the right type of fit. Do you have advice for companies, large and small, about how do you cultivate a sense of self-awareness within those managers or within the corporate culture to even be able to ask themselves whether that is happening?
I have become very cynical about this. I am not into a big educational thing. I mean, I think you educate people, and some people go, "Oh my God, am I doing that?" And they stop. It's a very small group. I really mean that. It's a very small group. And for them, it's very worth doing. I think that for me, the answer is to structure the situation so that the tendencies that people have just can't be kind of enacted in that particular situation. So it's not that I don't think people should know. I also think there's another problem, all the stuff about implicit bias, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. There is research that shows that if you show that all this stuff is so universal, it may give license to people to do it more rather than less. Because everybody's doing it, I can't help it, it's not really me, it's something inside me. I can't help myself. And so I think there's a downside to some of that as well that you have to be aware of.
And Brooke, I know, so you work a lot in the startup community, and you talked about that example of Etsy, which had this phenomenal growth of female engineering talent. Are there things that you've seen amongst the startup world where they might be a little bit more entrepreneurial or innovative that people that work at larger companies might be able to learn from as well?
Yeah, I think Etsy is definitely like the one of the best examples of that entrepreneurial spirit, that desire to fix it fast. I think, a lot of startups are thinking about it. I think one of the problems is that you have to make it part of your culture from the beginning. And for startups, sometimes they can use the excuse of, we don't have time because we're just trying to get off the ground, and after we're established, then we'll deal with it. And I think that's one of the major things that you have to just stop. You have to stop right there and say, no, we're going to actually make a commitment to do this. And we're going to talk to people who actually have this expertise, who can help us get better at hiring and get better at actually having diversity on our founding staff. And so there are a lot of people working on this. Paradigm is a good group to look at if you're a company that's wanting to improve. They're metric based. It just helps you from a research side see what's working and what's not working in your efforts. Yeah.
Can I just add something? We're talking about a lot about doing this stuff, but I think how you do it becomes very, very important. If it's seen that you're bringing in women and other people, minorities of all sorts, kind of for the wrong reasons, you wind up creating a very difficult situation both for them, because now everybody's doubting that, you're not there because you're competent, you're there because we needed to fill a slot with you. And you don't want to there certainly are enough competent people of the groups that we're talking about. So I think it should be very clear that there's a real merit process for these people being hired, and then that not only will help the kind of corrosive thing that can happen for people themselves when they feel like they haven't been selected because they're really good at this, the stigma that's associated with that. Suddenly, I wonder about these women who are suddenly put into these positions, and if it's unclear how they got there and why they got there, I think that's a problem. So you have to pay attention to how it's done, not just doing it.
And what do you all think about that question that Brooke raised at the beginning about kind of a difference-based approach where you might accommodate into your processes this notion that at a general level, male and female candidates might approach the process differently versus one that might support blindness for as long as possible? Do you think one type is more suited for a certain type of position or company? Any one of you.
Okay, I mean, I think, you have to realize that part of the reason that women and men present themselves differently is because of the reactions that they expect to get. And so, like, I've done a lot of research that shows that women will really self-censor and inhibit themselves because they know that if they promote themselves and they come on strong and they are assertive and bossy and all the other things that we say, they're really going to get knocked down for that. And so there's a kind of way of, trying to inhibit, and what it comes out is them maybe seeming more tentative, holding back more. So I hate to kind of say, to educate people that women are just like that and men are like that. So I worry about that. On the other hand, what is, and that women do talk about we all the time and men talk about I, and if when I recruit faculty, it's amazing, these guys, it's like they kind of created my whole field. I didn't even know that. I mean, it's just amazing. They all work in labs, and labs are like multiple people, but it's always I, and the women are always we. And that's true, and I think some cognizance of that going on is probably useful.
Victoria, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to say, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but from talking from personal experience, in every time I've gone out for a job interview in front of CIOs or CTOs, I've always exuded what I feel is self-confidence. I don't know if other people feel it as being bossy or abrasive, but I go through and I'm really confident. I never hold back, and I don't know why a female going out for a job interview for a job in a tech world or whatever world it would be would not be self-confident and show the person that I am the correct person for this job, male or female. So
but there's a lot of evidence that they don't negotiate for salary in the same way that men do. There's just a whole bunch of, and not all, of course, but more than is the case for men.
I think then maybe it's our education process, whereas these females are graduating from college and graduating from training school or wherever they're graduating from, there's something missing there, right? That now you've got this, you're going out into the real world. This is how you do these things. This is how you negotiate salary. You don't just take what's given to you. This is how you present yourself in an interview. This is how you exude confidence. I think that probably that area of additional reinforcement for some females is missing somewhere along the line.
I agree.
I agree, but I also want to caution that there's also plenty of research out there that women that do ask for the raise are perceived as bossy and then later sometimes get penalized on their performance reviews, and sometimes may not get the raise. That there is an actual research evident phenomenon where women, if they are starting to ask for more, are facing these subtle penalties. And that's the part of this that's the ickiest for me, that I really I want us to figure out, how do we get out of this? I feel like we're kind of in this rut here where you're penalized for doing the right thing, you're penalized for doing the wrong thing. And that's what I'd love to solve today, but I don't have the answer.
Well, and to that issue, there's some companies that are leading in the space saying that they actually don't want to have explicit salary negotiations anymore because of the impacts and unequal effects it can have as one type of model. We wanted to leave time for questions from the audience, so maybe I'll just do one quick question for each of you, and then we can turn it over to the rest of the audience. But so if you were the CEO of any of the companies kind of in the room, and you could just make one change, we know increasing more women in the tech workforce is, not just an issue of justice and equality of opportunity, but also just really good business, and that those companies do better on the market and attract higher talent. If you could make kind of one fix at a company, what would it be?
For me, I would probably have more women in a position of leadership.
Leadership, okay.
Right.
That's such a hard question. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me it would be to work on the hiring process.
Okay, hiring process.
Given that I'm an academic, I feel like I probably shouldn't even answer this question, but I concur. I think having women leaders, I think that the process is clearly very important. I think not only the process of hiring, but all the way through, every kind of employment decision that's made afterwards. We haven't talked about all of the other things that were mentioned today.
Right, and then Susan?
I'd like to see more partnerships between education and businesses. I think between the two of us, we can solve a lot of this.
Great. All right. So does anyone in the audience have questions? I think there's mics if you want to go up to the front and ask your question, feel free. And feel free to line up if others have questions too.
Sure. My name is Nadia Ichinamiya, and I'm co-chair of Women in Technology at Sony Pictures and co-founder of Women in Technology Hollywood. And you asked the question if what advice you'd give to a CEO. And unfortunately, I don't think we have that many CEOs of our companies in this audience, unfortunately. And I think, in a sense, a lot of what is being said today is a little bit preaching to the choir. So, and I've just been kind of talking with people here, and I think what is present here is like a sobering reality. So I think it'd be easily to get a little bit discouraged, like, who am I, like one person, like what can I do? So, and I know there's been talk about, we don't want to be optimists and kind of just, think everything's rosy. What could I do? What could we do? What would be your one recommendation that each of us could do tomorrow? One recommendation tomorrow.
I would say that if each one of us mentored one other woman and we continued to do that, the numbers would grow exponentially. It's just mathematics. And I'll just give you one example. I was involved in a program with Cisco to help deliver education and build entrepreneurs in India. And we did that there because we couldn't do it here in the United States because there were barriers to that. But as soon as two women, one woman from Cisco and myself, joined the advisory committee for that, two women in India stepped up to be owners of this company, and both of them are in technology today. I don't think that would have happened, but they needed that role model. And so I think if each one of us did that in some way,
There would be systemic change, yep.
I would say join a female technology group. Lean in, because there is strength in numbers, and as those groups continue to grow, I believe that we can work together as a group to get our voices heard and drive change.
And is part of that kind of cultivating a sense of community?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the mentorship thing is very important. I think the Madeleine Albright thing that was said before, I take that very seriously. I think that if each one of us goes out and encourages somebody, helps somebody along who, good, who really can be brought along, think of what that would do.
That's great. Let's go to the next question.
Hi, my name is Angie Hayden. I'm an experienced designer at Originate, and I live with three guys, and a few months ago, salary negotiation time came up, and it was kind of funny, like, for me, it's like the most painful thing that I can do, and I really hate it and dread it, and they're just like cool as a cucumber, like no big deal. And like my younger brother is 20, and he is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna practice, and just kind of like pitched his negotiation, and I'm like, that took me like 4 years. Like you didn't even think about it. So I was just kind of curious, like if you think there's anything that, or any differences in like how we grow up that make guys more comfortable having those discussions and more confident than females.
Yeah.
And then I guess the
I
follow-up
mean, we're encouraged to be, most of us are encouraged to be good and to be compliant and to kind of go along with the system and not go outside it too much and not kind of toot our own horn too much. And I think that those messages are loud and clear from the time we're young. Again, not for all of us, but they stay with us. And being liked, being thought being a good sport, stuff like that is really important to women in general, whereas men don't care that much about that stuff. It's a very different kind of, and I think it starts early,
So
and it gets reinforced all the way through.
Thank you. My follow-up question would be like I have a little sister, and she's getting into it, and she like asked me for advice, and we've had a lot of interns, and so like what advice or what things do you think we should be telling women whenever they're younger to help prepare and give them more confidence for those things? Yeah.
I mean, I'd lay it out for people, that, men 100%, women need 100% of the criteria to go for a job, and men need 50%. I mean, what is that about? You hear about that and you go, oh my God, am I doing that? I think there's some stuff for women that, can be can be taught, stuff that we talked about here today and a lot of other stuff, and encouraged and tutored.
Hi, I'm Linda Murray Thomas. I'm an IT program manager at NBC Universal. Also, I'm a STEM Advantage mentee, mentor women at Cal State LA and Cal State Dominguez Hills. 2 questions. One, piggybacking on the previous person. For somebody who's going for a raise, how would you tell them to present that to their, to their boss? Especially in instances where either you didn't negotiate before or you negotiated and you got cut down. That's one question. And the second question is, I forgot my second question. Oh, second question is, if you see women who have been passed over, or if you see things in the workplace that shouldn't be happening, what is the best political way within an organization to bring that up? Do you go to HR? Do you go to your boss's boss? I mean, and
Susan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I've negotiated my salary a lot. Facts and business value. I mean, this is a business conversation, and the emotion really just has to stay out of it. And I think you have to step back and look, what is the strategy of the company? How am I helping the company achieve its strategy? What is the value that I provide to the organization? What would happen if I wasn't there? That's not the conversation you have, what would happen if I wasn't there, but you think that through and you present those facts and you align yourself with the strategy, the success that you've contributed towards the strategy, and if you can put that in dollars, I'm in a business where I can put it in dollars, it's a lot easier, but it's really fact-based, it's metrics-based, and not emotional, and rehearse it. Rehearse it. Rehearse it to the mirror, rehearse it to a friend, own it and have confidence behind it, and go in there and really own it. And I think you'll be very successful.
I'm short. I'm trying to figure out my thoughts. They're running like really crazy in my head. My name's Ruby. I'm the one that created the child sex trafficking app out of frustration of hearing government talk for 6 years, being told over and over again, we need to do something for these kids, and nothing's being done. Because I picked them up in my car. That's my job. And so I decided to take it upon myself to do something at Hackathon, pulled it off, and I'm going to launch probably today. So, from that perspective, I will post it on this thread. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, but I'm really excited. It's going to create change across. So I'm really excited. Anyways, from the perspective of the hackathon, I learned a lot, right? Empowering people, minorities, women, from a global down to the molecular structure of down below. And one thing I learned of Cesar Chavez is what he did to get people motivated to create change, where he was being dismissed over and over again and being pushed out the door. Same with Martin Luther King. What he did is put a symbol on grapes. Really simple thing he did, went to all the different produce symbols. Now, it was not a big deal. People didn't think of it. They thought, oh, it's just a logo, spray paint. But did you know the impact of that simple logo is people like us didn't buy that produce because of a simple logo. And next thing you know it took this monumental turn. It was massive. Everything's online about this simple logo of Cesar Chavez. It's there. So from that perspective, I know just recently that the B Corporation process. So I'm thinking, well, we do the Cesar Chavez process with Martin Luther King, and then we put the B Corporation process, that if you want grants from the federal, state, county, municipal, or need funding, you must have the symbol represents women empowerment and minorities. Is that possible? From a ground roots organization, from a process of motivating us as a group to get this to move forward. Is that possible? And I'm asking you.
Brooks, you want to take that?
Yo, me? Sure. Yes, well, so B Corps are a great example. B Corps are a great experiment. They're a very recent development. And I think that we just saw our first IPO of a B Corp like 2 weeks ago, and that was Etsy. And so I think that there is hope for that kind of symbolic effort to take hold. It's early yet, but I think it's hopeful. I personally think the B Corp model is really exciting. As somebody that's worked in nonprofits primarily, but some corporate environments too, I think it's a really great idea to try to have more of a hybrid. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible.
So I think we have time for one last question, and then hopefully our panelists will be willing to stick around for a little bit after.
Hi, Hi, my name is Jeff Scowcroft. I'm manager of corporate application services with Walt Disney Company. And I'm somewhat surprised because at Disney I see a much more diverse and balanced workplace, and so that we still address and that we still have so many of these issues out there is shocking, and I know we still have lots of work to do. I'm not leaving, so as much as some people want to put me out to Meadow, I'm not going. What are the best things that, from my viewpoint, as a white male in management at a corporation, how can we help affect change? I mentor. I try to support my teams and people that work with me. What are the steps that you can recommend that the rest of us, faced with the white male thing? Mm-hmm. What else can we do?
Thank you for being here today, too. I think that's a great first step.
Good to have a representation.
Yeah, as managers or people who have responsibility for outcomes, it's great if you can give females the opportunity to either lead or, lead some of these projects, whether it's new product development, whether it's research and development. If you look at what are some of the key projects in the organization, get women involved in those high visibility initiatives. Thank you for being a client.
Anyone else, any concluding thoughts?
Oh, I would just say self-educate. There are so many resources out there online, and just go out there, do the reading, do the research. And Val from the ADA Initiative, who was up here earlier, she does ally training. So there's actually specific stuff that you can do.
Yeah, and there are so many great programs out there. I think the nice thing about having this conversation now really be like front and center for a lot of entities in the private sector. There's like a renewed focus on really great programs to mentor and educate young women, and to the extent someone like you can connect with those. I think sometimes men think that, for a young girl, the mentor has to be someone that looks like her, and I'm sure for all of us that's, maybe hasn't been the case because of the fields that we're in. So we really appreciate all those that came in today. And let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.